So, you've been bumping into David Hume quite a bit lately, have you? And now you're kind of curious, like, why are this guy's ideas from way back in the 1700s still relevant today?
Hmm.
Well, get ready because in this deep dive, we're tackling the Scottish Enlightenment, a time when reason was basically like the hottest thing since sliced bread, and David Hume was right in the thick of it.
Yeah, Hume, he wasn't afraid to, stir things up a bit. While everyone else was busy praising the power of reason, he was over there throwing these philosophical curveballs, questioning things that most people took for granted. And honestly, that's what makes his work so interesting, even now, all these centuries later.
One of those big ideas that he kind of turned on its head was this whole empiricism
Right,
thing.
right, empiricism.
So basically what Hume's saying is that all knowledge, like everything you know, starts with experience, right?
You got it.
It's not just you, like, sitting in a room, thinking really hard, and suddenly, bam, you've got knowledge.
Yep.
You've got to live it, you've got to feel it, you've got to experience it firsthand.
Exactly. Think about it. Like, when you're scrolling through social media, how much of what you're seeing is actually truly based on someone's firsthand experience, and how much is, well, their interpretation, their opinion, their spin on things. And that's something Hume was really getting at, this idea of being a discerning consumer of information. You gotta ask yourself, is this based on something real, something experienced, or should I maybe dig a little deeper?
It's like that saying, right? You don't really know fire is hot until you've been burned.
There you go. Perfect example.
Just because someone tells you fire is hot, it's not the same as experiencing it for yourself. And you know what? Now that I think about it, so much of what we believe, so much of what we take as truth, isn't even from our own experiences.
Absolutely.
From what we hear on the news, what we read online, stories from friends, all of that shapes how we see the world.
It really does.
And Hume is basically saying, hey, let's hit the pause button for a second and ask ourselves, where did this belief come from?
Yeah. Is this really mine, or did I just kind of inherit it from somewhere else?
Exactly. And this whole idea, it leads us to another one of Hume's big points, cause and effect, which seems pretty straightforward on the surface, right? Event A happens, then event B happens, so obviously A caused B. But Hume was like, hold on a minute, is that really always the case?
Right. He wanted us to question that automatic link our brains make.
Because our brains are really good at connecting the dots, even when maybe there aren't any dots to connect.
Exactly. And he uses this great example of billiard balls, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you've got your pool table, one ball slams into another, the second ball goes flying, and your brain instantly says, well, duh, that first ball caused the second one to move. But Hume asks, did it really, though? Or is that just how we're used to seeing things? Just because two things happen in a sequence one after the other, it doesn't automatically mean that first thing actually caused the second thing to happen.
So, like, just because I wear my lucky socks and my team wins the game, doesn't mean my socks caused the victory.
Probably not, no. Although it'd be pretty cool if it did work that way, right?
Right.
But think about it. Superstitions, lucky charms. We see these connections that might not really exist. And Hume is pushing us to look beyond those assumptions, to look for real evidence, not just coincidences or things we want to believe.
It's easy to jump to conclusions.
It really is. And that leads us to, the famous turkey analogy, the one I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, the turkey who thinks he's got it made because the farmer feeds him every day.
Yes.
And then Thanksgiving rolls around.
Exactly. Poor turkey. It's kind of a funny image, but it really makes you think.
It does.
Because it perfectly illustrates what Hume called the problem of induction.
Right. Which is basically this very human tendency to assume that just because something's happened a certain way in the past, it's definitely, without a doubt, going to continue happening that way in the future.
Exactly. The stock market has always gone up, so it'll always go up, right?
Or my best friend has always been there for me, so they'll always be there for me. Right.
Right. But Hume is saying, hold on, not so fast. Let's be careful with those assumptions. The past, no matter how comforting it might seem, is not always a reliable predictor of the future.
It's like assuming you're never going to have to see the dentist again because you haven't had a cavity in like 5 years.
Exactly. You might be setting yourself up for disappointment there.
Yeah.
Hume reminds us that we can't just rely on past patterns to predict what's going to happen next.
So, okay, it wasn't just, turkeys and billiard balls, right?
Yeah.
Hume kind of took his skepticism to some pretty big places. Like he was even questioning established religion.
Oh, absolutely. He definitely went there.
Yeah.
In his book, Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, he really digs into the traditional arguments for God's existence. And he's not afraid to challenge them. Like this idea that we can just look at the universe and because it's complex, automatically assume there must be a designer. Hume's like, hold on, is that really the only explanation? I mean, this was a pretty gutsy move back then, you got to admit.
Yeah.
It shows you how much he valued critical thinking over just accepting things on faith.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially for the time. He was living in a world where religion was like the main game in town, and he's over here questioning it. Bold move. But it sounds like he wasn't just trying to like tear things down just to be difficult
No,
either.
you're exactly right. It wasn't about just poking holes in things for fun.
Right.
Hume wasn't saying he had all the answers or anything like that. His whole thing was asking the tough questions, getting people to really think, to debate, to challenge their own assumptions. And honestly, that's what makes him so relevant even today. It's less about the specific conclusions he came to and more about that process, that way of engaging with the world.
So how do his ideas actually apply to us now then? I mean, beyond just being skeptical of what we see on Twitter.
Well, it's interesting because Hume's impact goes way beyond just, abstract philosophical debates.
Mm.
He had a huge influence on how we understand morality, for example.
Really?
Oh, yeah. See, before Hume, a lot of philosophers, they saw morality as this purely logical thing,
Okay.
all about reason, figuring out the right thing to do based on pure logic. But Hume comes along and he's like, hey, what about our feelings?
Right.
What about our emotions? He argued that our sense of right and wrong, it might actually come from a more intuitive place. Our gut instincts, our empathy, how we naturally respond to the world around us.
So it's not just some cold, calculated set of rules, but about how we connect as human.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can see how this idea ties back to those heated online debates we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
right? Everyone's so sure they're on the right side, so convinced they have all the answers.
Right.
But maybe, just maybe, Hume would tell us to take a step back for a second, check our emotions, try to see things from the other person's perspective, try to find some common ground.
So basically, don't just assume you're right because it feels right.
Exactly. You got it. Hume's skepticism, it's not just about questioning everyone else, it's about questioning ourselves, too.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our perspective isn't the only one out there and being open to the possibility that, hey, maybe we're wrong. It's about having that humility to say, I might not have all the answers.
It's a really powerful idea. And honestly, in this day and age, with all the misinformation and echo chambers online, it's so easy to get stuck in your own little bubble.
Oh, for sure.
It's like Hume is giving us the tools to navigate all of that noise.
That's a great way to put it. He's giving us this toolkit of skepticism, of questioning, of self-awareness. For a guy who lived centuries ago, Hume was really onto something.
He really was. So it's not just about being skeptical for the sake of it, Rice. It's about being open to actually changing our minds when we encounter new information.
Absolutely. One of the most important things Hume did was to highlight the limits of human knowledge.
Oh, interesting.
He reminded us that none of us have all the answers, and that's okay.
It's very humbling.
It is, isn't it? What matters is that we keep asking questions, keep looking for evidence, and keep challenging our own assumptions.
It's less about being right all the time and more about being willing to learn and grow as people.
Exactly.
I like that. It seems like his ideas still resonate with us today because they speak to this very human desire to make sense of the world,
You're absolutely right.
We all want to understand things.
We do. And his work reminds us that it's okay to be skeptical, it's okay to question everything, and it's okay to embrace the fact that we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
It's a very humble and I think ultimately a very freeing approach to knowledge. It really is freeing when you think about it.
It is.
It takes the pressure off, needing to be right all the time.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of wrapping up our deep dive into the world of David Hume,
Yeah.
what's the one big takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think if there's one thing that really sticks out about Hume, it's that he challenges us to really examine our beliefs. Like, not just accept them because they're comfortable or because everyone else believes them.
Right.
He's reminding us that just because something seems true, even if we've always believed it, it doesn't mean we shouldn't at least stop and question it.
Absolutely. And ask ourselves, why do I believe this? What's the evidence? And am I open to changing my mind if, new information comes along?
Exactly.
So my final thought for everyone listening is this. Think about one belief you hold. It could be about anything, really. Politics, religion, relationships, whatever's important to you. and just take a moment to examine it through that Humean lens.
I love that challenge. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Billiard balls, turkeys, the limits of human knowledge. David Hume definitely knew how to make us think.
He really did. So until next time, everyone, keep those minds questioning and those perspectives open.
And we'll see you on our next deep dive.